Love is the air. It's February 14th, Valentine's Day. Welcome to Breakfast Central. And this beautiful Valentine's morning, we have a heartwarming lineup for you today. A lot in store, from politics to news to discussions. We have a very packed package for you this morning on Breakfast Central. I am Benga Boro, and I hand you over to Lady Valentine herself.
Thank you very much, Benga. Thank you for that kind introduction. On behalf of all of us here at News Central TV, it is my pleasure to warmly welcome you to Valentine 2025. Where married people and relationship people have said, we no go gree, oh, we no go gree. Today is going to be tough. I don't think I've seen any year where married people have traveled as much as they have this year, yet they are complaining about the economy. Anyway, as we celebrate and rejoice and especially applaud your love this February, we look forward to doing the same celebration in November. This morning on Breakfast Central, so many interesting conversations will be had. But Benga, before we get into the political conversations we have today, did you see the pastor who said that Valentine is sponsored by one demonic god called Cupid, and quoted one scripture that did not relate to what he said? Do you think that Valentine's Day should be cancelled?
He's farming for engagement. That's what I'll say. There's nothing demonic about it. Celebrate if you want to, but don't pressure people too much. I saw this HR message from another company. I'm sure it was a joke, saying, please, no Valentine's gift. I guess they don't want people to oppress their colleagues. Yeah, so you see, it's a competition of balloons, champagne, chocolates, flowers, and all of that. But I mean, Valentine's Day should be celebrated every day. Let's show love. And let's hope also the government shows love to millions of Nigerians that are in need of succor.
Absolutely.
Let the poor breathe.
We do hope that, Nigeria, the government shows love to Nigerians, and that we can have a country that we can proudly say, a time should come when Nigerians will say, Nigeria is my Valentine. Anyway, let's start the conversations this morning in Enugu State, where we have the House of Assembly on Thursday has approved a motion to prohibit security operatives in the state from searching your mobile phones. Now, they have said that they have prohibited security operatives in the state, particularly the police and the EFCC, from conducting random and indiscriminate searches of individuals and phones. This motion was sponsored by the member representing Ezagu constituency, Chima Obieze, and 5 others. And he stated that the growing trend of random and indiscriminate search of people's phones by the Nigerian Police, Enugu State Command, and other security agencies in the state are in clear violation of Section 37 of the 1999 Constitution. He stated also that the section guarantees the right to privacy, stressing that the privacy of citizens, their homes, correspondence, telephone conversations, and telegraphic communications is hereby guaranteed. He didn't even go further to state that the Police Act and the Nigerian Police Force regulations do not explicitly authorize the police to invade citizens' privacy by searching their phones without a warrant or consent.
I really like that, and I'm sure a lot of Nigerians will be hoping that this is a nationwide and not just in Enugu. And I like the word indiscriminate and very random, because they've abused it. I mean, in other crimes, you can't just see policemen come to you and, oh, let me check your phone. You're invading that person's privacy. And the reason why a lot of them do this, to be frank, is a sort of extortion. They're looking for something incriminating. I mean, even so, married people don't even check their husband's or their wife's phone. It's that serious, a sort of privacy. Your phone is very personal to you. So to have the policeman looking at your transactions and, okay, open this app and all of that, when no one has made a report of fraud, or when they don't have any genuine reason. And even if someone has made a report of fraud, there's a due process that ought to be followed.
Exactly. If you're going to request for someone's details, is why there's certain information that your bank would never give out, that mobile service providers would never give out, unless there's a court order that's requesting for that. So there are procedures and processes that should be followed. In the same way that they can't just stumble, they should not, let me not say they can't, they should typically not just be able to appear in your house and tell you to open your house. They need to search you, unless it was smack in the middle of suspicion of commission of an offense, stuff like that. So it's just a lot of reorientation again that needs to occur. But I definitely applaud the Enugu State House of Assembly. But it should be worldwide. It's beyond just,
nationwide.
Yes,
yeah.
It should be nationwide. Thank you for that correction. It should be nationwide, and there should be a reorientation. They need to know that it's not allowed. It's wrong. You are infringing on citizens' rights. And the unfortunate thing is that even if citizens were to speak up for their rights, a number of them will not speak up because they are not the one holding the armed rifle.
It must have been so much the incident in Enugu State for the State House of Assembly to do this. But Olive, as a resident legal luminary, son in the waiting, does the Enugu State House of Assembly, does their jurisdiction apply to federal agencies? Because the EFCC is federal, the police is federal. Do you think it's within their purview to enact this sort of law?
So I don't think that is even what they're asking for is something that's not already existing. What they're saying is basically an implementation of a structure that already exists by the provisions of the law. I mean, if you look at, for example, the Section 37 of the Constitution that the member of the Assembly quoted, as well as the other laws, they're saying, look, this thing is already provided for in our laws. Simply follow the law. They're not asking for something brand new. It's just, unfortunately, the law as it is a far cry from the law as it ought to be, or the application of the law as is a far cry from the application of the law as it ought to be. So I don't think that there's anything really special that they're asking for that isn't already there. It's just an implementation of a system that's already there, which unfortunately is not the norm here.
Fantastic. I mean, get you a resident lawyer on your breakfast show. I mean, how many people can boast of a legal luminary? Thanks for giving us that context, Olive. And also in breakfast conversations, medical students resume protest over UCH blackout. We talked about this earlier this week, and we thought, finally, after 100 days, power has been restored. After 102 days to UCH main facility. But apparently, it's not yet Uhuru, as they say. Medical students at University College Ibadan, Oyo State, are set to resume protest over the prolonged blackout in the medical institution. The renewed demonstration is in response to exclusion of Alexander Brown Hall and Ayodele Falashe Postgraduate Hall from recent power restoration to UCH, despite assurances from the Ministry of Power and the Minister of Power, I beg your pardon, Adebayo Adelabu, that electricity will be restored fully within 48 hours.
I think their anger, their grouse is the fact that these students were the ones that pushed for power to be restored. They were the ones who went to the streets to protest. This light has been out for 3 months, over 100 days. It took over 100 days because of an accumulation of debt to IBEDC, that's the Ibadan Electricity Distribution Company. So they were the ones who brought this thing to the fore, bringing it to social media, bringing it to television. How then is the restoration now guaranteed? And the restoration now actually happens in 48 hours, and then the students don't even get their halls restored with light. As someone who's schooled in Nigeria, it's tough enough to go through. I mean, I don't know what the current realities are, but back in the day, we had times where, you wouldn't have power. We had to read with candles and lanterns, and it's not in 2025. That's not the kind of conversations we want to hear. This light was disconnected on the 26th of October, 2024. Unfortunately, look at where we are. It's a conversation that is still being had. So I'm hoping that all the stakeholders, will come together. The Minister of Power, the Minister of Health, the CMD, the Chief Medical Director at the UCH, to restore UCH to the glory that it once was.
Absolutely, and it's as important. I mean, restoring power to the hostel is as important as the main facility, because the students, they need to sleep, they need to study, they need power.
They have exams, they need to prepare for their exams.
It's almost like oxygen. It's a critical need. So please, the authorities in Ibadan should restore power to the hostels at UCH.
Haven't you even realized how sometimes your mood is directly linked to whether there's power?
Yes.
So if you're not having power, you're upset, you're cranky. It's just so many things that we should not really be having those kind of conversations in 2024. All right, and the final conversation we're looking at this morning, Canada denies CDS Musa and others visas.
There's no love in that one.
No love in that one. And, he did talk about this publicly, addressed it publicly. And after addressing it, we saw where Nuhu Ribadu did say, he's glad that he brought it to the fore and had said, you know what, Canada can go to hell.
Do we have that video? I believe we have it. It would be nice to take a listen to what transpired.
Thank you for the courage to say that Canada denied you, they can go to hell. Even though it's painful, it's disrespectful, but we are people, we are strong, and I agree with you. We have to fix our country. We have to do it well. Yes, this disrespect is too much. So, yet is another reason why we work hard to make Nigeria work.
This is quite shocking. A four-star general, Chief of Defense Staff, Federal Republic of Nigeria, who is Canada, to deny him a visa on legitimate grounds. I mean, this is, to echo the words of the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu. He said, Canada can go to hell. I mean, after what Nigerians have done for Canada, there's one very popular song, Canada, Canada, you know. A lot of Nigerians go to Canada, and this is how they pay us back on Valentine's Day. It's not nice.
Well, yes, it is very disrespectful to Nigeria that this has occurred, but we're seeing here that according to the Nation newspaper, there seems to be an explanation as to what has occurred. They said it's an error. Let me say it exactly how they put it. They say it was a diplomatic error on the part of desk officers who handled the CDS and other visa requirements. They went on to say that there was no note verbale from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, contrary to existing protocol for any trip by high-ranking government officials. So the questions that have arisen as a result of this announcement is, will this lead to some form of diplomatic tensions? You know, what will this mean? I know that they're definitely going to have conversations about it, but the look of it, it's already had a very negative implication.
I'd like to echo, also highlight one of the things the NSA said there. It's very disrespectful, and it's time for us to fix our country. So, like they say, the way you lay your bed is the way the way you make your bed is the way you lay on it. And if you've ever been denied a visa before, you would know how painful it is, especially on legitimate grounds. I was denied a Dutch transit visa so many years ago. Since then, any time the Netherlands is playing anybody, even if it's Pakistan, I always support the opposite team until they apologize to me and refund my $100.
I'm hoping that, you know, they watch this video and realize that they need to apologize to Benga Borough, the broadcast.
And a refund with interest.
Yes. Oh, no, so that's another thing. I think that embassies should now start, I'm hoping that in the nearest future, we can get to the point where they can start to refund people's monies. There are certain countries that do that. They won't collect your money until they're sure that they're, you know, grant you the visa. I think I heard Japan does that. I'm not quite sure.
But as we speak, at this very moment, the United States government is building its largest and most expensive consulate at the Eco-Atlantic in the world. Where do you think that money came from? It's from thousands of Nigerians, millions that have been denied visas. So it's a conversation we would like to have.
Yes, it is. But the reactions I've seen to this on social media are mixed. There's some Nigerians who have found it very disrespectful that this has occurred. There are certain other Nigerians who are actually very excited about it because they're saying if these leaders are the ones that are, you know, of course, Nigeria hasn't been the fairest economic climb, but they're saying that the leaders should also feel the pain that the average Nigerian citizen is feeling. But in case you're wondering what they went there to do, they were going to Canada for a veterans event, war veterans event, and they were invited. Unfortunately, half of the team were able to go, the other half were not able to go. But we're sure that it will lead to more conversations and will bring you more updates as we proceed. But that's all on Wake Up Conversations. Let's get into the conversation proper for today and share with you our top stories. This morning on Breakfast Central, Senate passes 54.99 trillion naira 2025 budget. We'll be looking at the details of that as Senator Bichi defends 700 billion naira to 2025 budget increase. We would also be reviewing the conversation about the Canadian embassy denying NSA as well as Ribadu's reaction and what the diplomatic implications might be. ABC closes case at Edo Tribunal. And we'll review the newspaper front pages. Join us for this. All these and more on Breakfast Central.
Hello, welcome to Breakfast Headlines. I am Benga Borough. The National Assembly on Thursday passed the 54.99 trillion 2025 appropriation bill, which the presidency says is designed to address key national financial commitments. Statutory transfers account for 3.645 trillion naira, ensuring funding for constitutionally mandated entities. A significant portion, 14.317 trillion, is allocated to debt servicing, reflecting Nigeria's ongoing fiscal obligations. Last week, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu raised the proposed 2025 budget from 49.7 trillion to 54.2 trillion naira, seeking legislative approval. The 6 governors of Nigeria's southwest region on Thursday met at Lagos House Ikeja for a high-level zonal meeting focused on regional growth and development. The Southwest Governors Forum meeting, hosted by its chairman, Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, was attended by Oyo State Governor Seyi Makinde, Ondo State Governor Lucky Aiyedatiwa, Ekiti State Governor Biodun Oyebanji, Ogun State Governor Dapo Abiodun, and Osun State Governor Ademola Adeleke. Speaking after the closed-door session, the chairman of the forum read a communique stating that the meeting focused on critical issues including agriculture, food security, economic collaboration, security, and the proposed Southwest Development Commission. A magistrate court sitting in Ado-Ekiti, Ekiti State, has struck out defamation charges filed by the police against human rights activist Dele Farotimi at the instance of Afe Babalola. The Nigerian police filed the charges after receiving Afe Babalola's petition accusing Farotimi of defaming him. In December 2024, Chief Magistrate Abayomi Adeosun struck out the case following request by police prosecutor Samson Osovu that the nominal complainant, Afe Babalola, has agreed to discontinue the suit. Counsel to Dele Farotimi, Kembi Adejare, confirmed they were served with a notice of discontinuation and defense legal team has agreed. Now, in politics, the Arewa Consultative Forum has rejected remarks attributed to All Progressive Congress National Chairman Omar Ganduje, suggesting that the North should wait until 2031 for a shot at the presidency. Northern leaders insist that no single individual can dictate the region's political future, dismissing Ganduje's warning to Northern politicians contesting in 2027. Ganduje reportedly declared that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will complete 2 terms, urging Northern aspirants to abandon any ambitions for the next election cycle. And finally, to security matters, residents of Birnin Magaji and Kauranamoda local government areas say a new terror group has come to town. This is despite claims by the Nigerian military that it has completely eliminated a good number of terrorists. The locals allege that the group Dan Saadi is being led by a local resident. Some of them spoke to News Central Television saying Kuriya Madaru, located in Kauranamoda local government area in Zamfara State, and Birnin Magaji local government area have continued to suffer from terrorist activities.
Welcome back to Breakfast Central. Our first conversation this morning will be looking at, of course, the Nigerian Senate, of course, that has approved the 2025 budget to a record high of 54.99 trillion naira. And we see here that the final figure marks a significant increase from the initial 49.7 trillion naira proposed by President Bola Tinubu. And that's, one of the key conversations that we're going to be exploring today, but we'll have our guests join us shortly. But now let's head over to Edo State, where the Edo State Governorship Election Petitions Court has adjourned its proceedings to March the 3rd for parties in the petition to adopt their final written addresses. Now, this comes as the All Progressives Congress closed its case after 4 witnesses testified to substantiate its claim of victory in the Edo governorship election. We have our correspondent Joshua Marai, who was at the tribunal and there filed this report.
The All Progressives Congress says that it has closed its case at the ongoing Edo State Governorship Election Petition Court, which is being held in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. This comes after the party presented 4 witnesses, despite its earlier promise to present 28 witnesses before the court.
I haven't assessed the evidence of PDP and they were supposed to call about 150 witnesses. They were only able to call just 19 witnesses. And I'm sure our lawyer believed that instead of helping them in their case, they decided to close their case because the evidence they brought up also has bettered our case.
They could not prove their case. Now, what do you want the court to do? The court should perform magic for you? It's not possible. I tell you for free that this petition died on arrival.
The People's Democratic Party, however, reacted to development at the tribunal.
The APC had told us, the third respondent in this case, that they had 28 witnesses to tender before the tribunal. And the 4 of them that were brought yesterday helped our case to substantiate our prayers that there was overvoting and there was non-serialization of sensitive materials. And there's a sense in which the councils saw that the witnesses were helping the PDP and decided not to call any more witnesses.
One of the counsels to the APC also aired the party's expectation on the tribunal's next course of action.
Paragraph 46 of the first schedule of the Electoral Act for us to file our respectful addresses. The respondents will start first since we called the evidence. We'll be given 7 days. The petitioners will therefore have 5 days to respond. The respondents will have 3 days to reply on points of law. The petition has been adjourned to Monday, the 3rd day of March 2025 for adoption of our written addresses. Thereafter, the tribunal will give us a date for delivery of considered judgment.
With the APC, PDP and the Independent National Electoral Commission having closed their cases at the tribunal, all eyes will now be on March the 3rd for the presentation of their final addresses. In Abuja for News Central, I am Joshua Imarai.
You're welcome back to Breakfast Central. It's time for our first stop story. The Nigerian Senate has approved the 2025 appropriation bill, setting a record high budget of 54.99 trillion naira. The final figure marks a significant increase from the initial 49.7 trillion naira proposed by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. But here's what you should know. The budget was increased following additional revenue projections from key government agencies, including Federal Inland Revenue Service, the Nigerian Customs Service, and other government agencies. Senate President Godswill Akpabio stated that these additional fundings will strengthen Nigeria's fiscal framework and support critical infrastructure projects. While the budget prioritizes capital investments with 23.96 trillion naira, concerns have been raised over rising debt servicing costs, which have jumped from 8 trillion naira in 2024 to 14.32 trillion naira in 2025. And only less than half of the Assembly was present at the passing of the budget.
All right, this morning we'll be looking at the conversations even further, but with both chambers of the National Assembly approving the budget, the bill now waits President Tinubu's assent to officially become law. We'll be looking at this with the head of Open Government and Institutional Partnerships at Budget Foundation, Vayala Kwaga. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me.
All right, and we also have joining us here in the studio, Public Affairs Analyst, Professor Simeon Nna. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Morning, Prof.
Good morning. Good morning. It's
All
my
right.
pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. Let's start with our virtual guest. Now, we want to get a sense of, your thoughts of the budget. We'll come into the details as to, we have our correspondent who will be joining us. We'll come into the details of what went down on ground, but your general sense of this budget.
So I guess the best place to start is to understand that Nigeria does need to spend a whole lot more money than it already is. I know that sounds counterintuitive because we've been complaining about cutting the cost of governance, but there's a difference or a distinction between cutting the cost of wasteful expenditure and spending on priority areas. There are aspects of our personnel schedule that need to be improved. For instance, payment of police officers, teachers, and doctors, And there are also aspects of capital expenditure that need serious improvement. By some estimates, Nigeria needs to spend in excess of $10 billion, I think, every year for the next 5 to 8 years. So while that is on one hand, on the other hand, these increases in the budget as we see them are often done with very poor oversight and with very poor reporting. And I mean from the conceptualization phase, from Federal Executive Council to the appropriation phase, the National Assembly, to the implementation phase, and even to the audit phase. We are constantly bereft of instances where there is proper oversight administered over the budget. For instance, the audit report that was most recently released, covered the previous 4 fiscal years. So we got the audit report for the last Legislative Assembly just, late last year. So how are Nigerians expected to appraise the performance of a government when they get audit reports 4 years late? The issue really is not about increasing the budget. It's about the implementation, the oversight, and the audit, which is constantly lacking in Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Vahala. Now, Prof, he did mention things that are very poignant about auditing, and we can get excited about this paper document when we see the budget, and a lot of people don't understand that it's a promise. This is what we budget, this is what we tend to do. So beyond the razzmatazz and the huge numbers we're seeing, quite a lot is still needed to be done from the federal government and also the Senate in terms of oversight functions. Now let's look at the budget. This current budget prioritizes security, infrastructure, and easing the cost of living crisis. In your opinion, does this allocation effectively address Nigeria's most pressing challenges at the moment?
You see, I keep on saying that the problem of this country has not been policies or rhetorics, because we have them in quantum. We can talk from now till tomorrow. But the problem is in the implementation. Let's even go back to 4 or 5 years. What is the percentage of capital projects that have been implemented in this country? These are the issues. It's not just about reeling out figures. Because for me, what they are just doing is copy and paste and then increase some areas. Okay. The last time I was here and we mentioned this budget, I think that was last week, I said we have not had the last. It will still be increased. I was proven right yesterday because the Senate equally increased by 750 billion. So we keep on increasing, and these increases, we have forgotten the debt profile. Now, when that money came, what some of us thought, was that they would have used it to reduce our debt profile. But they still went to budget. They said this was, okay, my colleague on the other side said there's need to increase payment of teachers, payment of police, and what have you. These things are just rhetorics. Is there anywhere that they have said that the salaries of teachers have been improved or salaries of police have been increased? Is it not the same police that yesterday we got a report from the same Senate that arms were missing, and they are denying? Instead of them telling us,
they said it didn't happen under this Inspector General. But
is that a discussion whether it happened on Abotiku's regime or what? The thing is that arms were missing. When we were growing up, let me land on this thought. When we were growing up, we learned that if a policeman or a military or parliamentary person loses his gun, he is dismissed from service. Who has been punished for those arms that are missing?
Now, staying on the issue of the budget, you did talk about poor implementation, but that's why there's the principle of separation of powers. We have the legislature. Why have they not done a better job at their oversight functions?
I have butterfly flying in my tummy when people are talking of this separation of power. There's no separation of power. The Senate is an appendage of the presidency. That's a fact now, because you would notice that, no, I'm not saying that they must, critique everything that is coming from the presidency. But what we're saying is that when the president is singing, on your mandate we shall stand, and they told you that anything that comes from the presidency, they are going to approve, where is the Where is the oversight function?
There are members of the opposition in the Senate too.
Did they join in singing the mandate? When those vehicles were given, you have forgotten. The Labour Party mandated their candidates in the Senate and the House of Reps not to take those vehicles. What happened? They took the vehicles. So it's the same thing. You have forgotten there was, I've forgotten his name, one rep member that was criticizing, he was not critiquing, he was criticizing the government. But immediately he was elected as a member of the House of Reps. And they asked him, he said, no, it's bad manners to talk while you're eating. That he's eating now is when he finished eating that he will start talking. So that's the trajectory of what we have as our National Assembly.
Okay, so maybe another thing now, you've talked about the specifics. You know, you're not particularly pleased, you're not excited about the specifics of the bill. Let's bring in our guest who's joining us virtually, Vayala, to talk about the details and the specifics and the things that speak to you. You know, or maybe we should start with your greatest areas of concern. I know that you've highlighted implementation and, you know, the different stages of going through of the budget. But let's talk about the specificity of the budget and if there are areas that maybe give you cause for concern.
For that, I think the fact that there is an increase in capital expenditure is commendable. However, this is only going to be taken with a pinch of salt and goes back to the question about implementation and the quality of implementation. I think, you know, like my colleague in the studio said, while we do have a plethora of laws, I am not even convinced that those laws and policies are qualitative. Because if you take the example of the budget, for instance, and you even look at our policy architecture, how much evidence is it based on? If you look at our planning, it's not linked to any form of evidence. It's not linked to any form of program-based budgeting. It is literally, as he said, a copy and paste process. So when you have a budget that is simply a slight increase from the previous fiscal year that does not aim to meet any targets, and, you know, I think we can commend the previous administration for at least coming up with a medium-term plan that they tried to link to the budget. This administration has not shown any inclination whatsoever to link its spending to any form of medium-term or long-term priorities. What it looks like it's doing is spend, spend, spend. And there are some schools of thought, there are some schools of economic thought that hold that government fiscal policy should be counter-cyclical. What does that mean? When the economy is overinflated, government spending should be somewhat reduced. When the economy is in the doldrums, spending should increase. The belief is that government spending can stimulate growth, but it's unclear what type of policy this government is pursuing. It seems as if they want to spend their way out of our problems. And when you look at the problems with oversight and implementation and the quality of public policy, I think these challenges, you know, will remain. I think looking at the specifics, like you asked, you know, I'm concerned that the process by which this increase was carried out was not duly considered. Yes, the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, I think in Section 16, allows the president to correct clerical errors or correct indicators, you know, that had led to the budget size. But this is a complete overhaul of the total budget itself. So it is not clear what rule or what provision or what regulation the president followed in increasing this. And, you know, just like my colleague in the studio said, the Senate also, in quotes, added their own, you know, 700 billion naira to this. I'd like to also point out that the Fiscal Responsibility Act, I think in Section 18, stipulates that the budget should be based on a medium-term expenditure framework. Yeah. That medium-term expenditure framework was passed by the National Assembly. And if you look at the amount, the total expenditure for this new budget, it exceeds even 2027 estimates. So I think it is completely bizarre what is happening in Nigeria. And looking at the details of the budget, I think is a foregone conclusion, because the process by which this figure was arrived smacks of some form of irregularity, the role of the National Assembly consistently increasing the size of the budget without any justification to the Nigerian people, I think is extremely, extremely serious. And I'd like to end on this point, and I concur completely with my colleague in the studio. The separation of powers, is dead in Nigeria. Symbolically, ranging from them singing APC slogans in the hallowed chambers to the behavior of the National Assembly regarding their oversight functions. I'd like to remind Nigerians that there are allegations of bribery by the national universities, by the Association of Vice Chancellors, to the National Assembly, stating that they had requested for bribes. None of this has been investigated. None of this has been resolved. There are also unresolved issues, relating to the budget defense process that the National Assembly has not made clear. We saw, a lot of back and forth, and shouting matches between the heads of agencies and the Senate committee chairman and the House committee chairman of the respective committees, that evaluate the budget defense process. But there has been no resolution, and the Nigerian people have not been carried along. It's really, really unclear what this budget hopes to achieve if it's coming from this type of process.
All right, thank you very much for speaking and helping us, through your thought process. But let's have our correspondent. We'll come back to you, Valala. Let's speak with our correspondent, Sagar, who was on ground and, covered this passing. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. Can you run us through the procedure of what exactly happened there, how many lawmakers were on ground, and what the entire process was like?
Good morning, Olive. Thank you very much for having me. Initially, at the beginning, plenary commenced as usual, and then after deliberation on some certain issues, bills, and also proposals, the National Assembly, the Senate particularly, went, on an executive session. This was around
Okay, we seem to be having some technical issues with our National Assembly correspondent, Sagar Ibrahim. We'll try to reconnect with you during the course of the program. But let me come to Prof. Still looking at the budget's social and political considerations. We saw an increase in the budget for anti-corruption. A lot of people have said, corruption is one of the evils bedeviling Nigeria. We need to fight corruption. Corruption is the reason why a lot of this budget, that's why we don't see implementation in the budget, and so many things like that. Now that the agencies, security agencies, anti-corruption and security agencies like the EFCC, ICPC, NFIU, have seen a significant increase in their budget, do you think these agencies will be more effective with increased funding, or do you think they need institutional reform first?
I don't think so. I think they need institutional reforms because there has been no change. I think it was former Senator Sani that said something. He said when corruption concerns members of the party, they use deodorants. If it concerns people that are not members of the party, they use insecticides. I think that's still it's on today, because
others will say you're giving them more money. Does it mean more money, more problems, like the notorious BIG?
You said it all. You said it all. You see, more money, more problem. You see, EFCC have been recovering so much that I don't think they need more money. The only people I think need more money, if you ask me, is NDLA, because they are doing a yeoman's job. If you look at the number of people they are arresting for drug abuse and, bringing in drugs and what have you, it has increased in this regime tremendously. So if you ask me if that agency needs more funds yet, but the EFCC, my brother...
Maybe it's a lack of funds that has been making them perform
I don't think so. I don't think so. Because the quantum of money they claim that they are recovering, now, if it is finances, they should have gotten from that quantum and continue their job, because I know that most of the agencies are supposed to retain part of the funds they are recovering, to run their operations. So it's a question of asking for more funds. See, there's an issue, before I forget, that keep bothering me. They just increased the production level to 2.06 barrels per day. How? How are they intending to do that? Now, calling Ogoni people and dashing some people money is not going to solve the problem in that area. You see, what one thought is that by now, they should have done a lot of infrastructures in Ogoni land so that the Ogoni people will buy into what government is doing.
And it's sustainable.
And then it's sustainable. It's not a question of bringing in some people. Recall, that was what even caused the problem. Abacha called some of the elites in that area, doled some money to them, and people now started agitating. They were not seeing the money. So they went to the creeks and started fighting. And then it accumulated to the killing of King Cyril. There are certain things you don't sweep under the carpet. The people are still mourning of the killing of those guys. Federal government should go, send people to go. There are town hall meetings. Go and talk to those people. Go and do some projects in that area before you talk of, oil from the area. Now you are talking of, you just invited some people, show them on television, you are doing this and you are doing that in Ogoni land. What is happening? And at the end of the day, you just, with fiat, increase the production level because you believe you are going to prosper. Let's see what is going to happen during the year. And they are basing their budget on that 2.06 barrels per day.
All right. I mean, it is really, it's a lot to unpack. All right. We're hoping we could reconnect with Sage, but we have a few more minutes. Maybe we can then have him join us. So I'd like to still bring back our guests into the conversation. We have Viola Kwaga, who's the head of Open Government and Institutional Partnerships at Budget Foundation. We were talking about we've talked about some of the stages of the budget, the implementation, but I want us to talk about accountability and, how well are we faring in terms of accountability, even though it feels like some of us already know the answer. But what can we do to ensure that we don't keep having the same story being repeated year in, year out? Everybody feels like it's just copy and paste, budget that's just really a template that is copy and paste and doesn't really speak to the actual reality and the actual projection of what the Nigerian state is. And at the end of the day, are questions really being asked and
what do you
answered?
do when the National Assembly seems to be captured?
I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer. I don't know how long we have left for the interview. But I will say that what Nigerians can consider very practically is to begin to identify members of the Senate or members of the House of Assembly, of the House of Representatives, I beg your pardon, that are willing and open to work for the people. There are a handful of them that have spoken, in public places and have demonstrated to some extent that they are interested in changing the narrative. One of them, Honorable Kingsley Chinda, I recall mentioned on an interview that they were, considering reevaluating the process of legislative recall and making it a digital process. I think that would be very, very well placed, especially in a country where the process for legislative recall is extremely cumbersome and extremely difficult for many Nigerians who may not even be literate enough, to pursue this process. Secondly, I would say that Nigerians must begin to think about how to punish politicians at the polls. The unfortunate thing about our electoral democracy is that the only way you can signal your dissatisfaction with the ruling party is during another year or another round of elections, which unfortunately will be 4 years later. However, Nigerians must begin to see these problems as existential. Yes, there are challenges of poverty, and it would be interesting to have a conversation around the issue of vote selling or vote buying. I don't know which one it is, and the role that poverty plays and the weaponization of poverty by the ruling class and the political elite. But for Nigerians to understand that these issues are existential, they must remember that the impact of their decisions may not be felt today. You may not, feel the impact of your decision, on the polity today. It may be some years down the line. we might, in quotes, never see it. But Nigerians need to understand that for the country to survive as an entity, as a nation, we must be able to take very drastic steps as citizens. There must be an interest taken in the way government is run, and the information provided by media organizations such as yours, by research institutions, by civil society organizations such as Budget, that try to provide information that can empower Nigerians to make the right decisions. Nigerians need to go beyond, making complaints on social media, to writing letters, to making demands on their elected representatives, both at the national level and at the state level, and exploring how to interface and engage appropriately with the newly christened, local government administrations, that seem to be given some form of new power. I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think there is some possible solution, but Nigerians need to see themselves in the driver's seat.
Can I talk
now, Viola, just before you come in, Prof, just before we go to Prof, quick one. Let's talk hope, because a lot of Nigerians watching and looking at, they want to know what will be there for the ordinary man. A lot of Nigerians are currently battling a record inflation, 34.8%, 3-decade high. And the president has said, he's going to bring inflation will drop to 15% in 2025. My question to you is this achievable? Is it ambitious? What policies should government pursue to implement a sort of control of inflation? If you can, in 60 seconds, please.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that it is an achievable metric. Even when the MTEF came out and, we saw that they had intended to bring it down to 15%, everyone in my organization was, incredulous about that because, there are so many systemic problems associated with why inflation has risen to what it is. The cost of food and the entire value chain and logistics surrounding that are not things that you can address in 6 months. There are things that require detailed, rigorous planning with the states before you can even say you would bring down, the cost of food and food-related items. Energy provision has fallen to, a record, I think, a general low. We've seen stories in the news media about how universities and hospitals have been taken off the grid. What would be the fate of manufacturing industries? This shows that the promises, the claims by this administration, that they intend to achieve may just be mirages or pipe dreams at best. I do not see, much being done regarding bringing inflation down, in the next half year.
All right, Viola Kwaga, thank you for joining us. Let's get the final thoughts from our guest in the studio here. Prof, let's hear your final thoughts in a minute as well.
Two things quickly. We talked about accountability. And my question has been, who is going to ask these people to be accountable? The courts are not there. In Ghana, as we speak, politicians are afraid to go to court. But in Nigeria, politicians are very happy to tell you, you can go to court, because they know nothing is going to come out of it. The EFCC and what have you, we saw a former governor that was even convicted after some time. I don't know what they did. He's still in the Senate. So what are we talking about accountability? We are just rigmaroling.
So you don't think this budget would address the struggles of the Nigerian people, cost of living and...
No, I don't think so. How is he going to force down inflation to 15%? We read one small book in those days in the 70s in economics, O.A. and he said that once more money is chasing fewer goods, there's bound to be inflation.
Okay.
Now, where are the things, most of the things are being imported? And look at the cost of dollar. Now, pegged at 1,500 by official rate. I bet you, if care is not taken, it's going to hit 2,000 before the year runs out. And if the cost of dollar is so high, and look at the ports, they have increased their tariffs. Yeah. Now, all these increases, are they not going to pass down to the final consumers? So how do you expect, where do you expect to force down inflation when prices of goods and commodities are rising every day? So I don't know the kind of abracadabra economics they are doing, the voodoo economics they would do to bring inflation from 34 point something percent to 15%. It is an impossibility.
All right. Professor Simeon Anna, thank you very much for joining us this morning on Breakfast Central. And thank you so much to our guest, Viola Kwaga, as well, for joining us virtually. This is where we wrap up the conversation this morning about the budget. Like our guests have said, it's important that Nigerians are interested in the process of governance, the process of this budget implementation, execution, and accountability is our collective responsibility. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Breakfast Central. Now, let's remind you that the 4th of February was World Cancer Day. And why is it important that a day is set aside to, quote-unquote, create awareness? Some would think, is it celebrating cancer? But it's cancer awareness, and it's important because early detection saves lives. Cancer organizations and media partners often work together to create public service announcements, to educate people, and to ensure that people get checked to prevent cancer and to ensure early detection. Now, today on the show, we're joined by Aspire Coronation Trust, ACT Foundation, a grant-making non-profit organization established in 2016 to support local, national, and regional non-profit organizations working to address challenges and associated vulnerabilities across the African continent.
Now, join us this morning to discuss this very important conversation. We are joined by Abiodun Owo, Program Manager at ACT Foundation, Dr. Adora Enyi, Director of Research and Innovation at Sebeccly Cancer Care and Support Center. We also have Mrs. Mojisola Enemashon, CEO, Cyril Foundation. A warm welcome to you both, and to Abiodun joining us virtually.
Thank you for having us.
Now, I'd like to start with you, Dr. Enyi. What are cancer celebrations? Why are cancer celebrations significant? And what key message should we take away from this year? And like Olive said, so why do you call a celebration when it's not a very good thing?
Yeah, so I think World Cancer Day celebration is more than just a date on the calendar. I think it's an important day that is being set aside to celebrate and remember those that are being impacted by cancer. Understanding that cancer is not just a disease, but it's a disease that actually affects and changes the lives of people who are affected by it and people who have loved ones and relatives that are affected by cancer. And so World Cancer Day is really set aside to create awareness. This year's theme, United by Unique, shares more light on the lived experiences and stories of people who have gone through these debilitating conditions to see how we can begin to pull resources together to support them.
All right. I mean, I think these are very important points to highlight when talking about cancer. Cancer is, oftentimes when you ask people, what's the one sickness that if you had a superpower to cure, what will it be? Everybody always, most times, echo cancer, you know. And Dr. Mojisola, you, of course, ensure that with the work that you've done from prevention to, from diagnosis or prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and even aftercare of cancer, I think it's also important for us to know how far we've come. So in terms of treatment options, how have these evolved for cancer, for the treatment of cancer?
Both locally and internationally, the care of cancer has evolved very much over the years. In the last 2-3 decades, there have been a lot of innovations in treatment of cancer, how they're treated, how early they're treated, and all these things have improved the chances of the patient staying alive. So there have been things like even the regular treatments like radiotherapy, surgery, which are the first go-to things, and chemotherapy. You also, all those have been improved in the kind of drugs they use. The drugs are more targeted to particular tumors. So a lot of work has been done in research, in cancer research over the years, and that has shown that in many countries, especially including Nigeria, that the outcome we're getting it, even though the centers are not available. We don't have enough centers, but we're still struggling with the ones that we have to ensure that we get the best quality care for the patients when they come for treatment.
I think another thing, you know, that I'd like us to maybe highlight would be like the most common kinds of cancers. I mean, in the course of your experience, let's speak with Dr. Enyi. In the course of your experience, You've been doing a lot of work with cancer. What would you say are the most common forms of cancer? Oftentimes we hear breast cancer. Also for men, you know, what kind of cancers do we see in men? And I'd like you, as you're talking about these cancers, let's talk about the barriers that are ensuring the progress we're making in the fight against cancers. Barriers being religious, cultural, social, economic, you know, whatever these barriers are.
Okay, so, I mean, cancer is not gender specific, but unfortunately in Nigeria particularly, the top 2 cancers that affect people are breast and cervical cancer, so it affects women. So women have been disproportionately affected by cancer, and then for the men will be prostate cancer. Now we are seeing more of lung and colorectal cancer affecting both genders, or whatever gender you choose to identify as. But some of the challenges, you know, that are being posed, one, of course, is the stigma. There's a lot of stigma. For many people, cancer is a death sentence. When you get that diagnosis, cancer, when you hear it, there's that God forbid mentality, right? So many people already believe that once you have cancer, you're going to die. So that stigma also contributes to a lot of late presentation that we see in the hospital. I think a second thing too is that many patients, when they get the cancer diagnosis, they run from pillar to post. So you see them leverage a lot of religious, traditional, unorthodox kind of care before eventually coming into the hospital, right? And then thirdly would be that even we as a community, we're not really supportive of people. We're not disrupting or debunking some of these myths associated with cancer, right? We are not supportive of people associated with cancer. And I'll give you an example. A woman has a breast cancer case, right? She has been diagnosed with breast cancer, and yet things like, oh, my husband said I should not get treatment, right? And you wonder, right, if your husband says you should not get treatment, then, I mean, you definitely don't want to create some family rift around that. Also, there's also this belief that when you have, for instance, breast cancer, and you have to take out the breast, right, you lose your identity, right? And a lot of women feel that way, that they lose their identity. And so you see a lot of women wanting to shy away from doing mastectomies or doing anything that would take off their breast and take off that identity. So these are some of the many, you know, issues. Then, of course, we know that cancer care is financially toxic.
Absolutely.
I always tell people that you're one cancer sickness away from poverty, right?
So that is for those who are financially stable.
Those who are financially, I mean, the average cost of cancer treatment ranges between millions of naira, we'll say like 5 to about 10 million. When we look at from surgery to chemotherapy, targeted therapy, radiotherapy, and then supportive care. So cancer care is financially toxic, and these are some of the challenges that we have to face when managing patients with cancer.
Thank you, Dr. And I'd like to bring Abiodun, our program manager at Foundation, into this conversation, joining virtually. Good morning, Abiodun.
Good morning.
Now, could you tell us how your organization is working to provide treatment and support to patients, especially those in underserved communities? Dr. Enyi here just told us how expensive and financially debilitated cancer can be.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So at Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation, what we do is to leverage partnerships, leverage relationships so that we can create social impact solutions across Africa, and that includes cancer care. So with partners such as Sebeccly Cancer Care, with partners like St. Cyril, and many others across Nigeria and across Africa, what we do is prioritize those who work in underserved communities. So you have the likes of Pink Blue, for example, who are far away in FCT in Abuja, working in remote communities. You have Dope Haven working in Kwara State in the remote communities, and who are also prioritizing people at risk, women, men, and also young girls now coming down with cancer. So what do? We invest in preventive care, for example. So you have education going on in communities, screening efforts going on in communities, because prevention, they say, you know, is always better than cure. And in this case, less expensive than curing. So at that level, we prevent cancers in the first place. And then when there are cancer cases, depending on the stages, some of our partners also provide navigation services. like access to medical care, access to counseling and psychosocial support and things like that. And when they cannot handle such, there's also opportunities for referral services, which is what we do at Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation. So as we do not intervene directly, we have the funds, but then they have the expertise, they have the human resources, they have the partnerships that they have created in the communities, and we work together to create these solutions together.
All right, I still want us to talk a little bit about funding and talk about maybe the innovative ways. Are there some innovative measures that can be approached to ensure that we can guarantee sustainability in funding of cancer programs?
Okay, thank you very much for that. So because cancer care can be pretty expensive, like Dr. Adora had established, we cannot rule out partnerships. We cannot rule out collaborations in cancer care. So governments, we have established that they can't do it alone. Private organizations also cannot do it alone. Funders cannot do it alone. So what do we need? We need public-private partnerships. Can you have organizations, private sector players who can, for example, bring in equipment into the country? Can we have maybe like tax leaves or reduced levies on cancer drugs, on cancer products, on cancer gadgets, for example? Cancer insurance especially is another model I think that we can explore. So you have even organizations that have HMOs, you find some of them are limited only to screening and maybe some level of care, or maybe vaccination. Can we also expand access, through those HMOs? Can they also provide comprehensive care to cancer in their plans? So public and private partnership is one thing that we need to continue to work on. We can also work on reducing the tax levies on cancer drugs, because that is a contributor to why they're so expensive. I think another way to do that is to also promote local production of cancer drugs, for example. Is that something we can explore here? So that we don't have to deal with importation and then cancer drugs are reduced. Besides that, I also think that our government also needs to take responsibility. They need to also intensify cancer care programs in the country. Yeah, we have the likes of Luth that have a cancer treatment center. I'm not sure we have up to 12 of such in the whole of Nigeria, and we need a whole lot more, because we have millions and millions of people coming down with cancers who cannot afford this care. And when you have public-private partnerships, it gives room also for subsidized treatments. So it doesn't become as expensive as it would be normally. We have such going on in Nigeria, and I think we need a lot more of that in order to finance cancer care.
Sure.
Definitely a lot more needs to be done, and we're just scratching the surface, barely scratching the surface.
I like the holistic answer she gave, but I think particularly I've always wondered why. I think it makes sense why the hospitals will want to not include cancer in the HMO, but on the part of the individual who's paying the insurance, it just seems like very unfair.
Yes. Now I want to bring Mrs. Mojisola Animasho back into this conversation. There's a ignorant misconception on the part of quite a number of people. They feel, cancer is a rich man's disease, they say, or we normally deal with, or a white man's disease, that we deal with malaria, typhoid, what has been done to deal with this misconception? And also, people would like to know, one of the frequently asked questions when it comes to cancer is it hereditary? Are there things you need to do, lifestyle choices you need to change to avoid cancer?
Yes, the first question is about, is it a rich man's disease? Unfortunately, just like Dr. Adora said, it doesn't respect gender or your financial status. So it affects everybody across the board, depending on what's age, more age or gender rather than economic status. And the difference in that is in the detection, the early treatment, the creating awareness. So where we're trying to close that gap is ensuring that both the rich and the not so rich are aware of what to look out for, know how to do the breast examination, know how to go to the doctors. And there's still a lot of awareness that needs to be created, but the NGOs are doing a huge amount of work in ensuring that people go to the doctor early, go to the primary health center early, go to the general hospital early, scale up and informing people, empowering people by informing them from the market women through to the people in the schools, the teachers. So everybody is having more of an idea about cancer now, rather than in whatever language you're going to say it, rather than it was before. And in terms of
if it's hereditary,
being hereditary, there are some cancers that are hereditary, but most of the time the cancer just appears, and there's some that can be called familial. Hereditary usually like childhood cancers, they can be hereditary, but you also have the ones that are familial. Breast cancer, for instance, it's not hereditary, it's not passed down from one to the other, but if a member of your family has it, it's best to ensure that you go and get screened earlier than those whose family members don't have it.
So what do you mean by childhood cancers, just to highlight what that
cancers that affect children?
Sorry?
You know, when you said childhood cancers are hereditary, I wanted you to throw some more light.
You can have some childhood cancers that you can actually, I think Wilms tumor is one of those that you can get. It's if one member of your family has it, then it's more likely that another person within the family can inherit that. But it's not actually. Looking at, we don't have statistics. I mean, data is very, very poor in Nigeria, unfortunately. So we don't have enough data to be able to follow this through in our country, but in other places you can actually follow through and see which ones are particular to all right. Okay. Different part of
I
the
want
world.
to still talking about these misconceptions and myths that we have. Dr. Enyi, if you go through social media, I guess it depends on your algorithms and the feeds you follow, but there's a lot of scaremongering. There's, if you microwave meals, you're susceptible to cancer. In my mom's house, she doesn't use microwave. A microwave.
For those of us that like to do gel polish, they say put your hand under the UV machine. We have cancer.
Non-stick pans. I mean, it's almost like I should go fry my eggs.
Baking a deep bread. It's almost like, what can we not do? Or what can we do?
Fatty things.
I mean, yes, there's a lot of myths. For one is, I think one common myth that I hear a lot, which from women, is that don't even wear bras with iron. Right, it will introduce cancer, underwire bras, right? Don't microwave your food, right? Unfortunately, the type of radiation that comes from microwave is non-ionizing, right? So it does not,
doesn't cause cancer.
It does not, there's no scientific evidence that the type of radiation caused in microwave is non-ionizing, so it doesn't, it has no direct link.
I hope my family members are
it's only ionizing radiation.
So it's only ionizing radiation. Then you hear things like, large intakes of sugar, right? Sugar fuels cancer, right? And that's absolutely incorrect, right? There's no evidence to show that. There's just 1,000,001 myths associated with cancer.
What of those of us that use gel polish?
Well, so unfortunately, it doesn't directly cause cancer, but of course, the light from the machine can actually destroy the skin beds around there, but not causing cancer, right?
Like me. Go natural.
Right, but not causing cancer. But just to speak more about cancer in general, in terms of prevention, in terms of screening, early detection, treatment, and supportive
actions
care.
that predispose people to cancer.
So I think the first thing is a lot of work has been done in terms of education. So the first thing is you need to even be aware and accept that cancer does exist, because there are still a lot of us in this 21st century that don't think that that word cancer exists, that believe that cancer is only for some certain group of people. And just as Mrs. Moji has debunked today, it is not a respecter of gender, it is not a respecter of age. And so it's important that everyone knows that cancer exists. It's also important that you begin to identify some symptoms. If you see suspicious symptoms, if you see a nipple discharge, if you touch your breast and you feel a lump in your breast, you should take action. If you see that you are spotting when you are not supposed to be menstruating, you should take action, right? If you're having difficulty urinating like our men, or you seem to be having pain during sexual intercourse, you should take action, right? It's very, very important. And I always tell people that it's unethical for you to pride yourself that in the last 10 years, in the last 5 years, you've never visited a hospital. And I tell you that the moment you are seeing me, it's always very, very bad, because then you're spending millions for something that you could have used 30, 40, 50,000 naira, to present if you had just done your screening.
Early detection.
And so I say, for those that you pay for health insurance, you have your HMO plan, why are you keeping money on the table, right? Why are you not doing your health screening, your cancer screening as part of your screening every year, every woman? If you know that your next birthday is your 40th birthday, or you know that you're already 40, you should have a mammogram done. If you're a woman that is sexually active, you should have a pap smear done, right? And if you're a man that is also at the age of 40 or above 40, you should get your prostate glands checked. You should do a PSA test, right? Every year, you should try to do this test just to check. And of course, if you're above the age of 45, get a colonoscopy done. Let's check for colorectal cancer before it becomes too expensive for us to manage.
I mean, I think in the course of this job as well, being able to interview a number of people, I found that cervical cancer is one of the cancer that presents pre-cancer cells.
Yes, so precancerous, yes.
And what that means is if you check early, you would never get there.
Absolutely.
So I'm hoping that with these few points of ours, we've been able to convince and not confuse you about early detection. And let's bring in Abiodun as well, who's joining us virtually. Talk to us about some of the biggest stumbling blocks that ACT Foundation has faced in this journey. I know you've mentioned funding and the ways in which people can come in and the ways we can navigate that. But what are some of the other challenges that ACT Foundation has faced in the course of doing this great work? And how can individuals, businesses, organizations be a part of what you do?
Okay, thank you very much. So I guess I'll bring it back to funding really, because we would really like to do a lot more than we're doing now. And so what our partners are doing is chiefly preventive measures, training health professionals, for example, because in Nigeria, oncologists, how many of them do we have? We don't have up to 100 in Nigeria. Yet we need a lot more than, yes, a lot have jackpot, and then our institutions are not churning out as much as are necessary, So this is also a huge challenge, because when the funding is there and then you do not have health professionals who can meet the community members at the point of their need, then there's a problem. So it still boils down to resources. So monetary resources is something, human resources is also another, because for cancer treatment to actually be complete, they need health professionals to be around on ground when people need care and support. So really, I'll bring it back to funding, because we really would like to do a lot more than we're doing right now. And then access to funding is something that we need to keep increasing so that we can reach, the last miles, the people in the remote areas who actually do need this support. And
so how can they reach out to you if they need to contact ACT Foundation, and they want to support in way of funding? Are you also open to accepting volunteers? How can they reach out to ACT Foundation?
Yeah, so we have our social media handles on Instagram, we're ACT Foundation _. We are also on Facebook as Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation. Our website is www.actrustfoundation.org. We're also on YouTube. You can reach out to us on Twitter, also ACT Foundation _. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abiodun. Just before we wrap up, I would like to take your final thoughts in 30 seconds. Looking ahead, what needs to be done to reduce the cancer burden in Nigeria and Africa?
Well, we need to continue to increase the awareness that's going on right now. And the government, it cannot be done without the government. The government has to make an enabling an atmosphere for people to be able to donate, even for instance, donating to ACT Foundation. give a tax break to corporates to be able to do that, and encourage people to be able to put good money down to ensure that people are treated
Thank you
early
very
and
much.
have better
Dr. Adora, she ate into your 30 seconds, so you have 20 seconds.
Oh yeah, so just as Ms. Moji has said, I think collaboration, the power of collaboration, it cannot be underestimated, right? There's need for more financing and funding in cancer care. There's need for more training of, oncologists and cancer specialists to support the already depleted demand.
All right, Dr. Adora Amy, thank you very much. Mrs. Mojisola Nimashao and Abiodun Owo, thank you very much, ACT Foundation, for the work you're doing. And we look forward to seeing more in the fight against cancer. And this is where we wrap up this conversation. We'll go on a break. And when we come back, we have more. Stay with us.
You're welcome back to Breakfast Central. We just finished a very important conversation on cancer awareness. It's very important, yes, for us to, do regular checkups, like the good doctor said. Now it's time for us to look at the newspaper front pages. What are the newspaper headlines? What are the papers saying? We'll start off with the Punch newspaper with the headline, 54.99 trillion naira budget. Experts list funding hurdles as debt servicing takes a whopping 14 trillion naira. Lawmakers approved 344.85 billion for themselves. Salaries, overheads go huge share of budget. And still on the front page, Ogun Ondo clash over ownership of oil-rich island. Let's hope that doesn't spill into a huge communal violence like we've seen in the past. And also, Customs delivers 3,897 arms seized to the Ammunition Control Center. That's on the front page of the Punch newspapers. We also have loan controversy on Osaya defense self in court. And on top of the Punch newspapers, Southwest plans joint operations against ISWAP terrorists. There's also federal government ex-envoys slam Canada for denying military chiefs visas. And Yahoo boys now involved in ritual killings and banditry, says the EFCC chairman.
All right, let's move on from that paper to the Vanguard newspaper. And on the front page of the Vanguard, there we see banks limiting ATM withdrawal below 20,000 naira face CBN penalty. In case the banks are not hearing it, let me spell it out. Any bank that compels a customer with sufficient funds in his or her account to withdraw less than 20,000 naira per transaction against the customer's desire for a higher sum would be contravening these regulations' spirit and sanctioned appropriately according to a CBN circular. Now is to test it. Is to now go to the ATM and say, I want to withdraw 100,000.
And I like that you said if you don't have the sufficient funds, it's not like your balance is 10,000, you now try to withdraw 20,000 and you petition the CBN. No, if you have enough money.
Yeah. All right, telecoms. Just yesterday we talked about the hike in the tariff costs, especially with certain service providers. MTN and the NLC had said that they were going to down tools, they were going to ask people to go on a strike and to shun a number of these ones. But MTN, people woke up yesterday to see that, in fact, the data, when I run out of, because I have a plan for my MiFi, but for my normal line, yes. If, for example, I run out and I have a quick need for data, there's one we used to do for 6,000 before. I think yesterday was like 9,000 or 12,000. I said, what's going on? Apparently, MTN backpedals and reverses 200% data tariff hike. Labor demands sanctions over alleged
impunity. MTN said it was a mistake.
They said a mistake.
What kind of mistake? How about those of us that already bought data at that 200%?
Would they give us back?
Exactly.
MTN be like, please forgive me. I know not what I do.
Things are happening. I mean, what kind of mistake
happening, is that? They say it's a mistake.
They
anyway,
should make a mistake to give us
MTN
free
should
data.
use mistake. Let me open my phone and see 100,000 naira airtime or 100
like
gig
that.
of
Why
data.
is it a mistake of taking from already downtrodden and poor
And I like
masses.
their social media campaign was also emotional. Nigerians,
they did a social media
they did a
campaign.
tweet say, we know say una dey vex. I saw one tweet that they did in Pidgin. Let me even look for it. That they did in Pidgin. It was so hilarious. And people were like, story, that are you going to give us back our money?
Exactly.
How,
that's the cocoa of the talk.
But it's understandable that, they said, to our 15 gig digital bundle lovers, you dey vex, we know. We know how upsetting it must have been to suddenly wake up to a 200% increase on your favorite digital bundle. We could share several reasons and provide explanations, but all that one a story. We don't cast, we get it and admit it. Let's just say a mistake. In this love season, don't stay angry with us. Please forgive and forget. You matter, die, and we'll never stop showing you how much.
Let's
continue our relationship.
Good PR campaign.
Very great PR. That one, I can't even fault it. I love it. Anyway, moving away.
Does it mean that's what we're going to start paying from
No. I think they'll revert it.
Of March?
They'll revert it, definitely, I think.
Okay.
I think. Anyway, let's move away from that to tell you, still on the front page of the Vanguard, that ILO boss visits Shatima, influx of ISWAP Boko Haram, Southwest governors, mall creation of joint security outfit. Loan controversy, Onosonya goes to court to clear name. And Senate asks federal government to repair bad roads nationwide. National Assembly passes 54.9 trillion naira 2025 budget, which was our conversation, our big story this morning. Visa denial. Canada.
Canada.
I wanted to say Canada can go to hell, but in my head I was thinking Canada. Ribadu says, Ribadu, the defense chief, of course, says, 1949 massacre of coal miners. Families sue federal government, UK government, others. Oyetola reaffirms commitment to marine resource development.
Yeah, and I like the case of the coal miners in Enugu, I believe, and it's good that they're suing the United Kingdom government. Just yesterday, there were representatives of Ogoniland. They made a case against Shell in the courts in the UK. We'll be giving you more of that next week. But let's look at this Nigeria, and I like this Nigeria because a lot of their headlines have quite a number of positive news there. Nigeria meets OPEC's crude oil quota of 1.5 million barrels per day. You know what that means? It translates to more revenue for government. Government can use this money for development programs and infrastructure. So some positive news there. And the government is even being more ambitious. It's saying you could hit a 2.5 million barrels per day quota. We heard that last week in some quarters. The headline of this Nigeria is 2025 budget 700 billion naira to cushion withdrawal of U.S. support to Nigeria. Talk about being proactive.
Yes.
And thinking about the day after. We all know what's happening with USAID and PEFPA funding. America says it's America first. Donald Trump says it's America first. So they are not thinking of Nigeria and other countries. So it's better we look after ourselves. And we also have a sustainable model for being really independent when it comes to something as critical as healthcare. It shouldn't be left in the hands of others to look after us and the well-being of our nation. National Assembly passes 54 trillion appropriation bill into law, says capital component of 2024 budget will run till June. Yes, so expect to see cranes all over the Federation as a huge component of the budget will be going into infrastructure. Maybe Olive can have a bridge that would take you from your house to front of Wemco Road.
If you could suggest, but jokes apart, if you could suggest, if off the top of your head you could wish for a bridge, where would you have the bridge? I think without a shadow of doubt, I would push for a bridge over Lekki Phase 1. So that those who are going to Lekki would go.
And everybody, if you're going to Victoria Islands and onwards, you just go on.
And having lived in Ajah, I'm not talking of Ajah on the road or inside Ajah, I would look for a bridge to help people that Ado Road. Once you turn into Ajah, there's only one road into Ajah, Ado Road. And if you get caught in that traffic, you are done for.
23 million. And one more thing I would like to wish for is, but I guess it's too late now, the setbacks, the roads in Lagos. I mean, if you go to Abuja and come back to Lagos, you think you're in a different country. You think you're abroad. If you go to Abuja,
once I go to Abuja, the moment you enter,
the roads
like,
are so wide, they're tarred. In Lagos, you have tarred roads. Look at Agedingbi, for example, so bumpy, you have to go for a massage when you get home. Even the so-called tarred roads are so, can they do something about it? It's so bumpy.
The potholes in Lagos Road, have you heard that they changed radio station?
They
can be on 99.1.
Yes,
next thing is to just move once you're
you can't even eat a snack. Imagine eating chin-chin or peanuts in your car. You feel like a juggler. So please, the authorities should do something about it. It's not just Center of Excellence. By name, they should live up to its reputation.
I know that we're laughing about it, but we're getting closer to the rainy season where I have been a victim of my car getting bad. My car's getting really spoiled because of a pothole I didn't see. Because once the rains come, you can't see the potholes. Your car, one day I was coming to work and my bumper pulled out completely.
You probably entered a manhole or something.
Obviously, you know, and I managed to just drive to the office as soon as I got there. It was terrible.
And that's money that I could have spent on five-star cuisine.
And I've used to spoil myself.
Yeah,
and I've used that money. That's why I don't have Valentine gift today, because it's the money I'm supposed to use for Valentine today that I used to fix my car last year when it spoiled.
God will provide.
God will provide.
And also on the front page of this Nigerian newspaper, APC closes case in Edo State. We did mention that earlier during our discussion of Breakfast Central. And FCT achieved 99% in 2024 budget execution, says Minister. Okay, the Minister said this. It would be nice for the fact checkers, civil service organizations like Budget to fact check that. 99% budget execution. That's fantabulous.
That is phantasmagorical. Are we really believing this? Okay, that's great news. We'll come back. Maybe that should be one of our topics for next week. We should look at 2024 budget implementation and
do a score sheet.
Yeah, a score sheet of that. Anyway, let's look at our final paper this morning, the Daily Independent newspaper. On the front page, National Assembly passes 54.9 trillion naira 2025 budget, raises own share to 344.85 billion naira. Then we have here, Senate charges federal government on bad roads, wants Northeastern Highway project. Federal government okays employment of 50 doctors, 100 nurses for correctional centers. So this story also makes me sad, because if we who are free men, you know, don't even have access to enough doctors and nurses, imagine what it's like in our correctional facilities. And regardless of what their crime is, those in the prison system, they deserve right to health care, right to feeding. So basically what they have now is 150. Good step in the right direction, but I just shudder to think about how bad the healthcare must be there.
It's terrible, and it's good that they're raising awareness about this, and hope the authorities will do something about it, because at the end of the day, they're still Nigerians and they deserve a life of dignity.
Absolutely. Tinubu committed to workers' welfare. Minimum wage review, says Shetima. Customs hands over 3,897 intercepted rifles, cartridges to NSA. CBN wants banks imposing withdrawal limits below 20,000 naira per transaction. Federal government mulls reduction of agencies at seaports for seamless operations. Raises committee to float private sector-led national flag carrier. Woos private investors to improve port facilities.
You know, oftentimes we see headlines like Customs hands over 3,897 intercepted rifles. Rifles are not kitchen knives. These are things that are meant to cause harm or be defensive. It's a national security issue, but time after time, and I believe our correspondents and journalists need to do better in terms of investigation. What's the end of this? What's the paper trail?
How did we get it
here? Exactly. We just report and go to sleep.
Will be funds of terrorism.
Yes, exactly. So who has been arrested? There's an address that this arms were meant to be shipped to. We hardly follow up on things like this.
And then even talking about our porous borders, the customs, for example, has been, you know, called to account a number of times. Fisayo Shoyombo, journalist, had done investigative journalism pieces on the Nigerian customs, and did they even really pay him any mind? There was a time every morning is good morning Nigerian customs, good morning Nigerian customs. What was made, you know, out of that? So we can't just pretend that we don't know what exactly is going on in terms of how a number of these monies are funds of terrorism, and the fact that our borders are porous. Therefore, these rifles, unfortunately, and this ammunition will continue to leak through our porous borders. Our
duty as the fourth estate of the realm, we continue to hold government account and do investigative pieces on this, and also follow up. Everybody, 2025, everybody needs to step up their game to make Nigeria a better place.
NECA seeks effective adjudication process in resolving industrial disputes Tinubu's reforms yielding fruits, restoring stability, Southwest governors say. Float Regional Security Surveillance Outfit, Southwest to have food inflation monitoring team. And the final story on the front page of the Daily Independent, I don't know if this one will call it Valentine gift. It's not the kind of Valentine gift Lagosians want. Lagos raises BRT fares by 18% February 17th.
And they waited for Valentine's Day to pass. So use that BRT. See your lovers now.
Men,
hurry up.
Run, go and see your lovers. Run from island to mainland, because from 17th, the fares have gone up. But this is all that we have today on the front pages of the newspapers, and all that we have this morning on Breakfast Central. We'll be wrapping up the show shortly, and I'll leave the show in the hand of the actual lover on the show, Benga, to give a shout out to his better half. But before then, I want to use this opportunity to say happy Valentine's Day to our viewers, to everyone who's watching. And we hope that you have an opportunity to celebrate love with your loved ones. And for those who are grieving a loved one on this day, my heart goes out to you, my thoughts and my prayers. And I hope that you're able to find comfort in the memories. This time next year, Benga, the Valentine shout out.
Yes, so to a hobby.
Amen. But please, I leave the floor to you.
From your lips to
God's ears. Amen.
Like they say.
Let's show them that it's not only politics. That we to Sabi love on the show. Please give shout out to your better half.
Happy Valentine's Day to all our esteemed viewers, wherever you're watching across the world. And happy Valentine's Day to the special woman in my life, my dear, lovely wife. You're the best gift I could ever have hoped for, and you're a gift from God. So happy Valentine's Day to you, and happy Valentine's Day to my dear mother. I love you so much. Good night, everyone.
I
said good night.
I should also say happy Valentine's Day to my dear mother. My dear mother sent me the most heartwarming Valentine's Day. For those of you who will not collect flower from your better half, it's okay to go and snap picture with your colleague's flower. Don't be jealous. There's love in sharing. And to my fellow single Pringles, the Lord will do it for us. We'll be back. We'll be back on Monday. Thank you very much for joining us. See you. They are shouting our ear.
And happy Valentine's Day to everyone that puts this
to
together.
Mayowa's wife, to Lakumi's children, to Joe, who is not on the show, who is probably doing Valentine. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. We'll see you on Monday. Bye-bye.